Tonight, the biggest security deployment in peacetime in France as the hunt continues for accomplices in last week's terror attacks. Also ahead, new details emerge about the final moments of the AirAsia plane which crashed into the Java Sea. A video where recreational fishers appear to harass a great white shark under investigation. And Tim Cahill takes the reins as Australia's captain for tonight's Asian Cup match against Oman. Good evening, Rachel Pupazzoni with ABC News. First, to an emergency warning that's been issued for a fire burning in the Rugged Hills estate in West Toodyay in Western Australia. The fire is burning in bushland north of Julimar Road and east of Koondal West Road. The bushfire is moving in a northeasterly direction and burning towards the Rugged Hills residential estate. Those in the area are being advised to act immediately and to leave now if it's safe to do so. Fire authorities say there is a threat to lives and homes. The largest domestic security deployment in French history is underway, with thousands of soldiers and police out on the streets. The massive show of force was announced as the latest edition of Charlie Hebdo went to the printing press. Up to 3 million copies of the magazine will hit newsstands tomorrow, dwarfing its usual print run of 60,000. Europe correspondent Mary Guerin reports from Paris.
The most important edition of this small satirical magazine, created to draw laughter and tears. The survivors of the Charlie Hebdo shootings working on a defiant deadline without 8 of their own. Inside, there'll be cartoons of their murdered colleagues. On the cover, the Prophet Muhammad with a tear in his eye, holding a Je suis Charlie sign under the words, "All is forgiven."
There wasn't a day we didn't receive death threats, so we knew, but at the same time, no one could have imagined that our team would be decimated with a Kalashnikov in the middle of an editorial conference.
Police guard the daily newspaper Libération building, a borrowed newsroom, with Charlie Hebdo's blood-soaked offices still sealed off as a crime scene.
There are mixed emotions. There is tension because of the deadline to publish, and then there's distress because they're overwhelmed by what they experienced.
Out on the streets, guards like never before, as the government ratchets up security in this nervous nation. A bold measure with a particular focus on vulnerable Jewish targets. 10,000 troops are being deployed on the streets of France, and 5,000 police will be assigned to potential terrorist targets like Jewish schools, where children have been arriving to armed soldiers at the gates.
This school is just around the corner from where gunman Amadi Coulibaly shot and killed a policewoman last week. Now the school's administrators are assuming he was on his way here.
Some of parents, they don't come this morning, because they are afraid about the security.
Tight security is already affecting everyday life in Paris. Bags are inspected, then cable-tied until you leave again. This woman tells me it all makes her feel much better. It's reassuring. It now seems clear one of France's main suspects is beyond its reach. Unverified video has emerged that appears to show Hayat Boumediene in Istanbul. The Turkish foreign minister has confirmed she travelled there from France on January the 2nd and then slipped into Syria, leaving a big hole in the French investigations. Mary Guerin, ABC News, Paris.
And we can show you some live pictures now from Jerusalem, where funerals are to be held for 4 people killed in last week's siege at a kosher supermarket in Paris. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to attend. He's encouraged European Jews to move to Israel following the supermarket attack. 17 people died in last week's attacks in France, including 12 at the Charlie Hebdo newspaper offices. Banners reading "Jerusalem est Charlie" or "Jerusalem is Charlie" and French flags have been raised at some busy Jerusalem streets in a sign of solidarity. And there's also a funeral service underway in Paris, a ceremony for the 3 murdered officers in the city. French President Francois Hollande is there. You can see him walking along a guard of honour. The US government insists no military secrets have been exposed after an embarrassing online attack from Islamic State supporters. The very public hacking has now been contained, but in Australia, computer users are being warned of another IS-linked cyber threat.
For a brief period earlier today, Islamic State was waging war on another battleground. This online assault, apparently at the hands of IS sympathisers, hacked the social media accounts of the US military's Central Command.
I can tell you this is something that we're obviously looking into and something that we take seriously.
On CENTCOM's Twitter account, more sinister posts appearing to show maps, names and addresses of former officers, suggesting the self-confessed cyber jihadists had penetrated the military's secure servers. The White House has played down those concerns, saying the material was already freely available on the web. But just hours earlier, President Barack Obama had been speaking on the importance of cybersecurity.
This week, I'm laying out some new proposals on how we can keep seizing the possibilities of an information age while protecting the security and prosperity and values that we all cherish.
In Australia, cyber attacks cause up to $1 billion in damage each year. And experts say anyone who has an email or a social media account is vulnerable to hacking.
It's clear that on a daily basis, all government systems and most corporate systems, I would say as well, are subject to some form of attack.
Home computers can be exposed too, a danger underlined by a new email scam which warns of possible IS attacks in Sydney.
Any topical event will be used by cyber criminals to target people to potentially open emails.
The hoax emails in fact contain attachments which can install malicious software onto PCs. The advice, like always, don't open them and delete immediately. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
Indonesian officials say an early investigation into last month's Air Asia crash has found that the plane probably blew apart moments before impact. The black box flight data recorder, which was retrieved from the wreckage yesterday, is now being analysed in Jakarta.
The pieces of the aircraft that we found are shattered, which means that the left side of the Air Asia plane broke into pieces. It means there was pressure that caused the explosion.
Divers have also retrieved the voice recorder, which stores radio transmissions and sounds from within the cockpit. The plane crashed into the Java Sea last month, killing all 162 people on board. An Egyptian court has overturned a 3-year jail sentence on corruption against ex-President Hosni Mubarak. The 86-year-old was sentenced to 3 years in prison last May after being found guilty of embezzling millions of dollars for his personal use. His sons, Gamal and Allah, were also jailed for 4 years. Now, the Court of Cassation has ruled that legal procedures were not followed properly. It's not yet clear if Mubarak will be released from custody ahead of a new trial. Doctors are warning that looming federal government cuts to Medicare rebates will put an end to bulk billing and increase pressure on hospital emergency departments. From January 19, changes to the Medicare rebate will see people pay $20 more for some visits to the doctor. The rebate on a GP visit of less than 10 minutes will be cut from about $37 to less than $17. GPs say they'll not be able to absorb the shortfall and will have to pass it on to patients. Queensland's election campaign is emerging as a referendum over privatisation. The state's LNP government has made a $500 million pledge to duplicate one of the busiest rail lines in the country using the proceeds of leases. Labor opposes offloading assets but won't reveal how it will fund its promises.
Themes are coming into focus, wallets are opening in the Queensland election campaign. The LNP government pitched its most expensive promise yet, $500 million to duplicate a rail line.
This is the most important economic infrastructure project on the Sunshine Coast.
Labor has promised $139 million over 3 years for 875 extra teachers.
A very modest spend campaign focusing on restoring frontline services.
Both parties are battling over how to raise the money. The government is depending upon a mandate to privatise public assets.
It only happens and is funded through the Strong Choices asset leasing program.
Labor's opposed to asset leases and is coming under sustained pressure to reveal its economic plan.
Our economic strategy is ready. We will announce it at our timing of our own choosing.
The Premier is emphasising strength.
With my strong LNP, strong financial management, strong advocates.
Queensland is 8 days into the roughly month-long campaign. Federal Labor leader Bill Shorten is showing no signs of leaving, but the Prime Minister Tony Abbott is yet to appear. Hundreds of people have now nominated as candidates for Queensland's 89 seats. The LNP and Labor are united in not wanting a hung parliament. In the Premier's own marginal seat, a draw was held to determine spots on the ballot paper.
Number 2 is Campbell Newman.
But Labor's hope to topple the Premier is last. John Taylor, ABC News, Brisbane.
A man is in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in Sydney's southwest. Police believe the 23-year-old and his 2 friends were lured to a meeting or drug deal about 10 o'clock last night, then ambushed by a lone gunman.
Screaming in pain, Ali Arab is rushed to a waiting ambulance. Several shots had blasted through this car's passenger window, one hitting the 23-year-old in the abdomen. His 2 friends inside the car escaped unharmed.
The people who have been involved in the incident are known to police, but at this stage we're making further inquiries in relation to any links with any other organisations.
The lone gunman appears to have been lying in wait. He escaped on foot.
The description of the gunman that I have at this stage is a male wearing a balaclava, and that is all.
The Housing Commission unit block is well known to police. Residents say there's been at least 1 drug raid here in the past 12 months. Police say Ali Arab and the 2 men he was with inside the silver car did not live at this address. Who they were meeting with and why they were here is still unclear.
We believe this is a targeted attack. We don't believe it's random, and certainly we don't believe that there is ongoing fears for the community to be concerned about.
This may not comfort residents as Guildford remains one of Sydney's gun crime hotspots. There's been at least 10 shootings in the suburb in the past 12 months. Most remain unsolved. Ali Arab remains in a critical condition in Westmead Hospital. Whoever ambushed him and shot him is still on the run. Lucy Carter, ABC News, Sydney.
South Australia's Primary Industries Department is investigating a video on social media in which recreational fishers appear to harass a white shark. The department doesn't know the identity of the men but warns they could face fines of up to $10,000.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
How big is that?
This video, which has now been removed from social media, is being investigated by primary industry officers. It was reportedly filmed earlier this month in the Upper Spencer Gulf near Blanche Harbour, which is a popular shack area south of Port Augusta. The men are seen using baits to lure a white shark closer to their boat.
Oh, here he goes. He's going to grab it.
Whoop.
The white shark is a protected species in South Australia.
We obviously see these kinds of activities as a breach of the legislation, and we look to investigate these matters and will hopefully be able to speak with the individuals involved.
There are some exceptions. Shark cage diving is a booming tourist attraction in Port Lincoln, but they're heavily regulated and there are limited licences.
The attraction of great white sharks is a regulated industry, and licensed operators go through stringent processes to attract sharks in the right and appropriate way. And this sort of behaviour largely, moves away from that.
The Primary Industries Department warns interfering with, harassing or killing a protected species carries heavy penalties.
We don't encourage people to interact with sharks. It's very important that they, respect these protected species, and they are protected for a reason.
Oh, watch out. Oh, that's so big, man.
While white sharks are rarely seen this far up the Spencer Gulf, locals have reported some sightings around the shacks where the video was reportedly shot this summer period. Karma Reid, ABC News, Port Augusta.
Tasmania's Police Commissioner is preparing a response to concerns about the legal risks of growing medicinal cannabis. At least 2 families have now alerted police to their illegal cannabis crops, seeking assurances they won't be charged. It follows the arrest of a Brisbane man who gave cannabis oil to his 2-year-old daughter.
It's been 3 weeks since Lynn Cleaver turned herself in to police. She alerted them to a cannabis crop she uses to treat her son Jeremy's epileptic seizures.
We had no response from our local police station here in Launceston. We emailed again the Premier and no response from them either.
Police say it was an oversight that they didn't respond to Ms Cleaver, and her concerns have been referred to the Commissioner. They've promised not to pursue legitimate growers of medicinal cannabis, but questions remain.
How many plants can we grow? Can he take his medicine in public? Can other people give him his medicine?
Earlier this month, a Brisbane man was charged for giving cannabis oil to his 2-year-old daughter to treat her cancer symptoms. Tasmanian growers say there's no guarantee it won't happen to them.
There's a lot of other people in the background who have been assisting us, and we don't know whether they are protected by the commitments that have been made by the state government.
Hannah Rubenak has homegrown cannabis processed into oil for her brother Tim, who also has epilepsy.
And it is concerning when I am transporting it to the processor, whether if I do get caught with it, where do I legally stand on the matter?
Her questions to the government have also gone unanswered.
Because they probably are not sure themselves where they stand by just simply making statements without legislation to back it up.
We need firm guidelines. If that means legislative change, so be it.
In a statement, the Police Minister, Reen Hidding, says he's sympathetic to the concerns and the government may support future trials of legal medicinal cannabis. Emily Bryan, ABC News.
With more people surviving cancer, preserving a patient's fertility is more important than ever. But there's little reliable evidence about which treatments are most likely to leave cancer sufferers infertile. Now, Australian doctors have launched a world-first study aimed at giving patients the best chance of having children. Here's medical reporter Sophie Scott.
Hi! At just 22, Amy Weiss had to cope with being diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma and also whether to protect her fertility before starting treatment.
All of a sudden I had to think about how many kids I wanted to have, and it was very overwhelming. It was a lot to think about on top of everything else.
Patients like Amy have to weigh up whether to freeze their eggs, sperm or embryos. Not all cancers or treatments like chemo render patients infertile. And right now, there's no definitive data to guide doctors either. But for the first time, doctors will study 5,000 cancer patients in Australia and New Zealand, tracking their cancer and fertility.
We will know for different age groups and different types of cancer and different types of treatment who needs to freeze their eggs and who doesn't, and if they do, how likely they are to have a child later down the track. This is the first attempt in the world to collect information on a national scale.
The new register is called Future Fertility.
80% of cancer patients survive their cancer diagnosis and they become survivors. And the number one thing that worries the most is infertility.
Before having chemo, Amy chose to freeze her eggs. Now in remission, she's very happy with her decision.
It was a bit of a relief to know that I could then live my life normally, and if I needed them, then they were always there.
A choice that should be made easier for patients in the future. Sophie Scott, ABC News.
Australian car designers have been celebrated at the Detroit Motor Show as the American car company General Motors launched 2 new concept cars. Both were designed and built at the Holden plant in Port Melbourne. But as North America correspondent Ben Knight reports, if the cars go into mass production, they won't be built in Australia.
For car designers, the chance to work on a concept vehicle comes maybe once or twice in a career. To launch it at the Detroit Motor Show, is something extra special.
You do go home with a smile on your face knowing what you're working on for the next 6 months, and we worked hard.
General Motors has launched 2 concept cars so far at this show, and both of them were designed and built in GM's Holden Design Studio in Port Melbourne.
It's a real strong, I guess, sign to us that at least for design, GM is really a believer in Australian design.
2015 will be a turning point for the American car industry. It's only just emerged from an $80 billion government bailout last month, and it doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. This is the concept car that General Motors hopes will bring electric vehicles into the mainstream. It's a prototype that was developed in Australia.
An international team of designers from the US and Australia.
The other Australian concept car is the Buick Avenir, developed in Port Melbourne from the first sketch to the clay model through to this one-off prototype.
If you were to take a look at it, you wouldn't see a whole lot of buttons and knobs and gadgets, but that's the idea, that's the hard thing, to make the technology so integrated.
As a concept car, there's no guarantee that this will ever go into production, but what's interesting, especially considering it was designed and built in Australia, is this is exactly the kind of size the Australian market is used to.
That's no coincidence.
There's a particular skill set that we had in our Australian design team, especially with larger cars.
It's no consolation to the thousands of Australian car workers who won't be building the replacement for the Commodore or the Falcon. Ben Knight, ABC News, Detroit.
Let's return to a memorial service that's underway in Paris. The ceremony is being held for the 3 officers who were murdered in the city during terrorist attacks in France. As you can see, the French President Francois Hollande is there. Let's listen to the proceedings.
Lieutenant Ahmed Merabé, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Lieutenant Franck Brinceau-Larreau, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur.
And this is where we'll leave the ceremony in Paris. It's being held to remember the 3 officers who were killed during terrorist attacks in France last week. A spaceship loaded with supplies has successfully docked at the International Space Station. The unmanned vessel is carrying nearly 3 tonnes of food and equipment for astronauts to conduct scientific experiments. Built by NASA's private contractor SpaceX, the Dragon capsule was captured by the station's robotic arm slightly ahead of schedule.
And we have grapple at 4:54.
Dragon is the only cargo ship in the world that can return to Earth intact. It's due to splash down in the Pacific Ocean in about a month. The Socceroos are playing Oman tonight in their second group game of the Asian Cup. And if you don't want to know the current score, a warning that we're about to put it on screen, so please look away for the next few seconds. Tim Cahill is captaining the Australians in the absence of injured Mile Jedinak in front of a big crowd at Sydney's Olympic Stadium. And that is the current score with less than half an hour to play. In the earlier Group A match tonight, South Korea beat Kuwait 1-0. And you can see tonight's game replayed in full on ABC television from 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time in New South Wales, Victoria and the ACT as well as Tasmania. That's 9:30 in South Australia, 9 o'clock in Queensland, 8:30 in the Northern Territory, and it's on at 8 o'clock in Western Australia. You can also listen to the game live on ABC Extra on digital radio. Australia's Bernard Tomic has made a bright start to the Sydney International Tennis Tournament. Tomic breezed through his opening round match, but it was a different story for fellow Australian Sam Stosur, who went down in straight sets.
The car park was as good a place as any for Sam Stosur to warm up for a second round match, but out on centre court she soon had her hands full with the world number 25 Barbara Zalavova-Strycova.
That's well played from Strycova.
Stosur dropping the opening set in a tie-break before the Czech took control of the match in the second. Bernard Tomic's quest to win a second Sydney International title began against Dutchman Igor Sijsling.
Well done.
He needed just 19 minutes to wrap up the opening set, and he coasted through the second, winning the match 6-1, 6-2.
Wow.
The tournament's defending champion Juan Martín Del Potro was also in action. It was Del Potro's first match in 11 months after overcoming a wrist injury. The Argentinian swept aside Sergei Stakhovsky in straight sets.
Look at the excitement from...
3, 2, 1, go!
There was plenty of excitement in Melbourne, where more than 300 ball kids rubbed shoulders with Maria Sharapova and Australian youngster Thanasi Kokkinakis.
Great memories here from last year. Yeah, winning my first ever Grand Slam match. I was fortunate enough to get a wild card last year, and I think I've improved a lot, so hopefully I can go a bit further this year.
And it was a light-hearted affair in Sydney last night, where Roger Federer took on Leighton Hewitt in a game of fast four tennis. The shortened format made for some exciting play, but it was a familiar result. Federer winning in 5 sets. Damien McIver, ABC News.
Australian all-rounder Mitchell Marsh says he's recovering well from injury and hopes to be fit to play towards the end of the one-day series against England and India, which starts on Friday. Marsh says the triangular series should be ideal preparation for next month's event in Australia and New Zealand. The 23-year-old has been out of action since suffering a hamstring strain during last month's second test against India.
I think the biggest thing for this team is just building momentum going into a World Cup, and it's a great opportunity for us as a team to try and take out these series, and that's what we do every series for Australia.
Australia meets England in a day-night match at the SCG on Friday.
Rain starting to clear from much of the central and western parts of Victoria after some fairly worthwhile falls, although showers are then redeveloping about the southwest corner as a low pressure system continues to move south of the state. And for Tasmania, the rain's only just beginning, and there is a flood watch out for the eastern river basins, but at this stage most of the rainfall totals expected around about the 10 to 30 millimetres. Could be some isolated heavier falls than that, and that could trigger some increasing stream rises. We've also got showers and thunderstorms spreading further east through New South Wales as that trough also moves east. Severe thunderstorm warning for the upper west, and that's for the potential of damaging winds and heavy rain with storms. And storms are also quite active through the western districts of Queensland, and of course up across the north, the monsoon trough still quite active, so we're looking at fairly widespread showers and thunderstorms across most of the tropical regions. Now as we move into tomorrow, that trough pretty much clears from the southeastern states. It's just a moist onshore wind flow that could trigger a couple of isolated showers about the southeastern states, but these falls are going to be very light and quite patchy. We're really not looking at anything significant with those. Will be quite windy though through many areas of the southeast. That's thanks to the low pressure system, which will continue to move away from Tasmania. Now the trough will sit from the southeast through to the northwest of Queensland, so along its length we'll see some showers and storms. Again, some possible heavy falls about the Northern Cape in Queensland, also through the far north of the Northern Territory. But over through the west we've got very hot and dry conditions continuing for Perth. In fact, temperatures set to rise into the high 30s as we move into the weekend. Any showers for Canberra and Sydney, very light, very isolated. Similar for Adelaide and Melbourne, relatively clear conditions. And and just some patchy rain in Hobart in the morning. That'll clear to isolated showers as well. And that low pressure system continues to move away on Thursday, so showers contracting to the west and south of Tasmania. Should be mostly dry across the mainland, perhaps an isolated coastal shower, but again that trough triggering some showers and storms through Queensland. Although a hot day in Brisbane, we're just looking at the potential of an isolated shower.
And that is ABC News for now. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. 7:30 is next, but we'll leave you with pictures live from France, where a ceremony is being held in Paris to remember the 3 officers who were killed in last week's terror attacks in France.